confirmation from U.S. officials that North Korea has launched multiple short-range missiles into the East Sea. Let's get right to it with Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom, who has the latest on this story tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. The number we're hearing is 3, and U.S. officials say one of the missiles failed during the launch process and the other 2 failed in flight, though they are not saying how far they went. But South Korean media says a missile launched from one of North Korea's eastern provinces, which is on the opposite side of the Korean peninsula from Seoul, appears to have been a ballistic missile that flew about 150 miles and then landed in the ocean between Japan and the Korean peninsula. The firing comes one day after North Korea's state-run media released pictures of Kim Jong-un inspecting a missile site that appears to show North Korea's missile program has made unexpected advances. The photos include a previously unseen missile that experts say might be the key words there, the next generation of missiles the North has already fired. All of this is troubling for the Trump administration, which this week said that North Korea seemed to be backing down a bit. Remember last week, Kim Jong-un was threatening to fire missiles near the island of Guam, which is a U.S. territory and considered to be U.S. soil. In July, North Korea conducted its first successful test of an intercontinental ballistic missile that could reach the shores of Alaska, and experts say they may also have the technology to arm the missiles with a small nuclear warhead. We should note that while the North has fired yet another missile, the USS John McCain is in port, out of commission in Singapore after being hit by an oil tanker. The McCain is equipped with an Aegis missile defense system, an effective counter-weapon to North Korean missiles. And remember, South Korea and the U.S. military are conducting joint military exercises as we speak in the Korean peninsula.
All great points, 10 times. Thank you, Trace.
Province of Gangwon into the Sea of the Korean Peninsula, or Sea of Japan. That's according to the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff. The projectiles flew about 250 kilometers. South Korea's military is closely monitoring North Korea for any additional movement or provocation. North Korea has been conducting a series of ballistic missile tests this year, firing 18 missiles in 12 tests in February. In July, it launched an intercontinental ballistic missile, which North Korea claims could reach anywhere in the world. The latest launches come as the U.S. and South Korean militaries conduct their annual joint exercises.
We have this breaking news from Korea where the North Koreans apparently sent off 3 short-range missiles. These are not ICBMs. And apparently it was a failure, the missile launch itself. That clearly, in my mind, was a reaction, or their attempted a reaction to our military exercises with the South, right?
Yeah, it's clearly what this is. They always do something during these annual exercises that the United States and South Korea is conducting, just to remind them that they're opposed to these exercises as a matter of policy and principle. This is not in reaction to the statements that the president said about the ultimate impact on North Korea if they did something that provoked the United States. It's not a part of that. Quite frankly, North Korea has toned down some of its rhetoric and also has not taken any serious ballistic testing since those statements have been made. I doubt seriously if that'll last for a while longer, because I think ultimately he's going to conduct his 6th nuclear test within the next several weeks or months.
Officials say the projectiles were fired from Kitaeron in the province of Gangwon.
South Korean media says a missile launched from one of North Korea's eastern provinces, which is on the opposite side of the Korean peninsula from Seoul, appears to have been a ballistic missile that flew about 150 miles and then landed in the ocean between Japan and the Korean peninsula.
We have just learned that North Korea has just launched what is being described as an unidentified projectile, a ballistic missile, we're told. This is the first missile launched by North Korea following sanctions imposed by the United Nations Security Council.
The South's Yonhap news agency reports that the North launched several projectiles traveled about 250 kilometers. U.S. Pacific Command says that it detected the launch of 3 short-range missiles over a 30-minute period from 6:49 to 7:19 a.m. The first and third missiles failed in flight. The second missile appears to have exploded almost immediately. South Korean government has convened its National Security Council to gather more information about the North's intentions.
This is another Fox News alert. Reuters is reporting that North Korea has fired an unidentified projectile into the sea off its eastern coast, according to the South Korean news agency. A piece of news that has just suddenly broken. Let's bring in our panel. Matthew Continetti of the Washington Free Beacon, Karen Tumulty of the Washington Post, and Byron York of the Washington Examiner. I suspect that the North Koreans did not know about Hurricane Harvey, but Karen, their timing is impeccable, isn't it?
Yeah, they do have a knack, it seems like, for sort of adding chaos on top of chaos. So, but the frequency of these things, I think, is the thing that's got to be most worrisome right now.
Yeah, now we need to point out that there's an awful lot we don't know. Again, we have not independently been able to verify this report of a missile test. We don't know anything about the nature of the missile, whether it was medium range or long range, anything like that. So, but it does seem to be an indication. There are a couple of sources now reporting that North Korea has fired another projectile. One assumes it's a missile. Byron, it's interesting because there had been some talk on the part of the Trump administration that maybe Kim and his regime was backing off and quieting down a little bit. After all, the threats that talk about fire and fury, now apparently not so much.
That's right. We should never be surprised when North Korea does this, but I believe the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said a few days ago, well, gee, it's been a good while since they've last fired a missile. The idea being that they had backed off. Now, if this is true and they've done it again, I think Tillerson will have to reconsider his statements. But I think there was some optimism in the administration with this idea that perhaps they had backed off the threats to Guam and maybe just pulled back a little bit. So we'll have to see what this is now.
All of which would seem to point out, Matthew, something that is fairly self-evident, which is you can't count on Kim Jong-un to do anything except the unexpected.
No, not at all. They have to learn what missile they fired and where it was directed, of course. That plays a lot into exactly what type of response he's expecting from the United States. Though you get the sense sometimes that we have President Trump with a whack-a-mole presidency. You know, he hits one crisis in Afghanistan, he has another crisis on the domestic front, and just when you think that the North Korean front is settled down, here he...
A photo released by North Korea's state media is turning heads the world over. It shows the regime may be close to completing a new type of submarine-launched ballistic missile. Kim Hyun-bin zooms in on the development which could further escalate tensions on the peninsula.
A recent photo unveiled by Pyongyang indicates that the regime is close to developing a new submarine ballistic missile known as the Pukguksong-3. The chart shows the structure of the SLBM displayed behind North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during his visit to the Chemical Material Institute at the Academy of Defense Science earlier this week. Many experts believe that North Korea could be in the final stages of developing the missile.
In a recent video, Pyongyang released footage of possible body of a Pukguksong-3 SLBM, so I believe it is near completion.
Earlier this year, the regime fired a new intermediate-range SLBM known as the Pukguksong-2, which is known to use a solid fuel engine. North Korea is trying to perfect the solid fuel engine since this makes it harder for satellites to detect the missiles before launch. Experts say that the regime could have even test-launched the Pukguksong-3 engine in their recent cold-launch test in late July.
I believe the recent 3 cold launch engine tests from the regime were from the newly built SLBM.
Experts say North Korea will consider the most effective date to maximize their provocations when planning to test launch the new missiles.